All right, this is going to be an X space about inspired by a actually a original video that Dr. Wright did back in 2014 about how Bitcoin takes away power. And Casey actually helped me inspire this space. And we're going to have Craig Mason on today. And I titled it Bitcoin's Power Shift, Money and Media with Veteran Bitcoiner Old Craig. You know, how Bitcoin reshapes power from money control, content creation with veteran Bitcoiner. Set a reminder for the space. It is the 21st of August, coming into the summer solstice. It's a great day. And we're going to go ahead and get started here in a moment. So stay tuned to the end. I'll do my best to get all this recorded on YouTube. Leave a comment, hit the like button, share this video. All right. Make sure to get it out there. And I will see everyone. I'll see you at the top. All right. It's going to be a great day, y'all. What's up? This is going to be the Bitcoin Power Shift Money Media with veteran Bitcoiner, old Craig. Craig, better known as Craig Mason Space. I added up Casey, Mila, I added you guys as co-host. Alex, I added you as a speaker. This is actually an inspired. Casey was the one that inspired this space here for me, and she, I think the inspiration that really, one of the inspirations for being passionate about Bitcoin for myself is the same as hers, and how it takes power away from those who control money. And Bitcoin, it was actually a video back in like 2014. A documentary video called The Bitcoin Doco featuring Craig Wright. And he talked about how, Bitcoin actually is more than just it's more than just a coin, money go up. It is actually, its long-term vision is to take away power from those who control money. And I think that's part of the reason why it's got such fierce opposition to anyone who tries to promote that side of it, like the bit side. And so this space is really, it's inspired by that, by us, the community, by the people who want to take the power back, who want to rage against the machine and fight against the tyranny, and we rise up. And how do we do that? Well, we got to have our own. We got to have our own money. We have to begin to establish our own way to trade and transact. And Bitcoin is the perfect, the original Bitcoin protocol, the Satoshi's Bitcoin is the perfect mechanism for that. And so this is really a kind of an inspired space for that. Hopefully we can get into some of the aspects about that, because Craig goes way back in the Bitcoin space. He's way before I do. I don't even know how long. I mean, I'm really curious to know how long he's been around. Seems like a long time. And one of the similarities, it seems like he's kind of compared to someone like Daniel Kraywitz, and we had Daniel Kraywitz on a space here recently. It was a really good show where he went into all the details about, the hyper Bitcoinization, some of the things that he talked about. And I've seen Daniel on other spaces or shows with Craig before, and they seem to be on the same page, at least similarly. They're both very highly intelligent and analytical. But Craig also does like it looks like he does a weekly live stream on his X account, old Craig. So I'm curious to learn more about him. And then the other part was Craig wanted to talk about content creation and how content creation is revolutionizing the future of the internet, with the micropayments. And so that'll be an interesting concept, with companies out there that are doing that now. So let's see. I don't see Craig up here yet, but we'll get started here in a minute. I did start the recording on this, so I'm just waiting for, if you want to accept co-host there, boom, accept. You guys can come up. Mila is traveling to, I think she's getting on an airplane today, as far as I know. So she may be in an airport or somewhere in a jet plane somewhere. We'll see what she has to say. Alex, I did invite you up. Feel free to jump up, and I really want to hear what Craig has to say about this. I don't see where he's at yet. Maybe he needs to be messaged. Casey, if you want to message him, see where he's at. Like to start on time, get verified. So, but yeah, as a starting point, I wish I could share this video, but it's a 2014 video. It was shot before Craig Wright had even come out. I think maybe it's his first appearance. I really don't know, but somebody shot a documentary back in Australia. He was living at that time. He looks really young. And he talks about how Bitcoin takes away power. And he gives the example of how, everything in the future will be logged in the way of a payment transaction online. For example, like a micropayment. He gives the example of like a Pepsi can, where somebody buys the Coke can and they litter the Coke can out into the water, goes out into the bay, into the ocean, and somebody finds it, says, "Oh, this was Gavin's Coke can. He's the biggest litter of all time." So he gives that example about the future of things, and talks more in detail on the technical side of how it actually takes away power. And I think that's really an important element that we seem to forget and talk about, like how if we want to have power, well, and be out from under our controllers, I study the law, and I heavily involved in the law and the legal side of things. So when it comes to the power of the elites, I look at it from a legal side, and how this umbrella has been put upon us with the 14th Amendment, back in after the Civil War in the United States, and that reached out to everybody across the globe with this 14th Amendment citizen. Every country across the globe, for the most part, was affected by it. So I look at it from that angle. But now, if we actually have a whole organic angle to take away the power, because it's the money. That's the money. That's where they get all their power from, is controlling the money. And so when they can print the money into infinity at Congress, uh, and the Federal Reserve just does what they're going to do, in the IRS, their collection agency, well, it holds the people down, from a 9 to 5 job, and it just keeps the people from being able to rise up. So we're trapped. So it's by having Bitcoin, the original Satoshi's Bitcoin protocol, it allows us to have a way out where we can transact without them. We don't need to have their system of control. Okay, Brett, you're up as well, dude. Looking forward to having you come up. And Casey, you want to maybe you can message Craig. Hopefully, and I'm not seeing you. Can you send an extra?
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Brett, what's
Hey,
up, dude? Okay,
I
maybe you guys are up on stage. I'm not seeing. My space is not updating. An extra, Casey, please give the address. Something to Casey. Not sure what that means. I'm doing the space right now, Alex, so you should jump in. Yeah, so let's see. Okay. Craig, please join now.
I did message him, so I
Nice.
haven't got a response yet. Good to see you, Brett. Good to see you, everyone. Excited.
Nice. Okay, now I can see people. For some reason, it's not seeing. Who's on stage, Casey?
Speaking of content creation and stuff, it seems like there's a sort of coordinated push for SPV from Craig and Kurt and a few other people on X, which is good to see because, as far as I'm aware, Bitcoin SV is the only one that actually needs SPV and the only one that's actually trying to do it.
And what is SPV?
I think that it would be great for that to enter the consciousness of cryptos a bit.
Can you tell what exactly is SPV, Alex?
Simplified payment verification. It's literally just a way of using the blockchain architecture so that you don't have to validate everyone else's transactions to validate your own. Because of the way Bitcoin works, you've got the block headers and then you've got the transactions that are pinned to it for each block period. Instead of validating every single transaction in that block to validate that block is true, you only need the Merkle path and the block header. And that's effectively just a chain of hashes that allows you to confirm or deny whether that transaction is in that block and whether that block is part of the longest chain of block headers. It's in section 5 of the white paper, going back to basics, but crypto never really likes the basics. They like to overcomplicate everything.
Yeah, my thought process around that was that, recently I think Luke Dash Jr. posted on Twitter that SPV doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that would just be such a great marketing campaign. Literally, you don't need to do anything else. Just like put a giant billboard of Luke Dash Jr. saying SPV doesn't exist. And like, that's the marketing for SPV,
I'm going to do that right now. You'll see it on Twitter in 5 minutes.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, SPV doesn't exist, so therefore, according to Luke Dash Jr., there's no. It's impossible. I responded to that. He said, "Yeah, it's impossible. It can't happen." And just he said it was impossible to do that. So apparently, Dr. Wright said otherwise. Then he called Dr. Wright a fraud. He resorted to name calling after that. It looks like so. Yeah,
there's a concept of the majority is always wrong. And whenever someone starts parroting what the majority believes, you got to question whether the majority is wrong, because they normally are.
Yeah, the masses are the asses.
yeah, the masses are the asses for sure. Yeah, so dude, one of the inspirations of this space so today was like about the old video that Dr. Wright had put out in 2014. Well, he didn't put it out. Somebody interviewed him on a documentary video called the Bitcoin Doco. And I wanted to elaborate on the concept about how Bitcoin takes away power. And Casey, you and I were having a phone call about this a few weeks ago. And it was like this topic that really was inspirational. Seemed like that's what inspired you to get into Bitcoin, was this concept. So perhaps you could maybe share your insight on that, Casey, to start with.
Well, I just find it really funny how they're scrubbing so much profound history of Craig's off the internet, because when I first really heard that was Charles from CoinGeek had interviewed Craig. The title of it was "Bitcoin is not a cryptocurrency." And in like the first 5 minutes of that interview, he just thoroughly and so succinctly explained how if you take the power of someone being able to control and manipulate money away, if nobody can change the protocol, there's no power in that. And so therefore it can be used as a tool for actual, real world capitalism and fair chance for everyone. It just changed my view of money and what's possible. And I was hooked ever since, of like really researching, how is that possible with this technology, which has led to this day. So it's just, I think, one of those captivating concepts that can really bring the average person in, because I'm not a technical person. I love listening to all of you guys dissect the technology and really go deep, but I don't need to understand that to know that this is going to change the world. So it's just, I think it's one of those things that can, like I said, convert the normie into an interested person that starts to take action in this space. So
and that is through the concept of how Bitcoin takes away power.
yeah, just how it takes the power over money. What was it, Henry Kissinger's quote I pulled up to read? He said, "Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control the whole whole continents. Who controls money can control the world." So, I mean, these people are trying to completely take over humanity and have global domination with the current financial structures they have in place. And I just, I don't consent to that. So that's why I'm here.
Brett, did you ever watch that video, the Bitcoin Doco, the documentary?
Yes, I love that one.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah,
it too.
there's 3 parts. You've seen this one, Casey, I'm pretty sure.
Really? Okay. I haven't heard that. I don't remember that title, but
That was yeah, that's the inspiration for this space. I mean, that I wish I could share it right now. I don't, X doesn't really let me, but it's like
It's
the first time he was ever interviewed, I think, that I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, he was interviewed as part of like a documentary that was being filmed about Bitcoin's presence in Australia.
Yeah.
And they just, they asked him questions like, "Well, what's your involvement?" And he's basically like very tongue in cheek. He's like, I'm a researcher," And they're like, "Well, what was the price when you got in?" And he's like, "The price?" Yeah, what was the price when you first got in? There wasn't a price.
There wasn't
I
a
love
price.
the
Yeah.
smirk on his face when he says that. That's like one of the best smiles Craig's ever given.
It's like there wasn't a price.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have seen that clip.
So what is the concept, Brett, that he's referring to? Like, or I guess it seems like this topic hasn't really been expounded on, and I'm wondering if maybe you have ever thought about it, like how Bitcoin takes away power, the power of money. I mean, have you thought about that concept much?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. So I think that Casey really said it really well, it's just about the level playing field and, the free market, the ability for, people to vote with their dollars, etc. What that is about, if you really think about it, it's about distributing the to the edges of the network, right? So instead of, the counter argument to that is, to really just centrally plan everything. And so, if we just imagine it like, just a single town or something like this, no one has any money in their pockets. We just all walk around and someone that's deemed the leader of the town just decides you're going to have chicken today. You're going to eat, tacos. You'll have eggs for breakfast. Like that's all, central planning. And there are some benefits to central planning, right? Because like if you know that exactly how many eggs are going to get served that day, you can order the exact right amount, right? So there's some benefits to it. But then the counter argument to that is just really pushing the agency so that the decision-making power gets pushed out to the edges of the network, which are the people. So they walk around with a little bit of money in their pocket, and then they can decide whether they want to have chicken or they want to have whatever. And but there's also this complication around the ability for there to be a level playing field. So when you have a free market, but you tilt the playing field so that that okay, everyone has the ability to decide what they want to have, but we impose this tax. If you order chicken, you get a 50% tax, and if you order eggs or whatever, you get no tax. It's like, well, okay, you're not technically deciding that what I'm going to eat today, but you're really making it so that there's this massive incentive to go in the direction that that you want to manipulate, right? So it's a step away from complete central planning, but it's still like a huge implementation of that. And so I think really what Dr. Wright is talking about when he's talking about a locked in stone protocol being a level playing field and removing the power of money, it's about sort of taking it as far out to the edges as possible, so that people, identity is firewalled from the blockchain, but it's not absent, right? And this enables people to exchange peer to peer without third parties, et cetera, all the things that Bitcoin is capable of doing, but it also doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, where we have a purely anonymous money that suddenly encourages and incentivizes people to do all these terrible things, and because the waters are too murky for there to be accountability and auditability of people's actions. And that's why he always talks about the ring of Gyges. So what you have in this is a system where you can thread the eye of the needle. Anyone on the edge of the network can thread the eye of the needle, go into the center of the network and out without a massive tax, right? It's like 1/100,000th of a penny to be able to use to be able to act on your agency, decide whether you want the chicken or the whatever for dinner or for lunch that day. And by building such a system, what you do is you sort of remove the last barriers to a true free market, because now you actually can use the market as a metric on what sentiment is, right? And so so that's at least my interpretation of it.
And it was like the 2012. It was the 2012 Ron Paul campaign that started really for me, like looking down. I mean, I'd already been looking down this road, but to seeing like, oh wow, there might be a problem with the Federal Reserve. There might be a problem with the IRS. There might be a problem with our central government figures here, and we might have a guy who actually could stop it. This guy Ron Paul, he started talking about all these concepts. So I'm like, how is he still walking around? I mean, how come they didn't assassinate this guy? This is crazy talk, but these were concepts that seemed to be like ringing true in Bitcoin at that time. In hindsight, well, I hadn't even heard of Bitcoin really at that time, but it's still looking back in hindsight. And I know like Alex, he's on here. I know he was, he, and also, who else was it that was involved in Kurt, I think it was Kurt too, that was involved in the Ron Paul campaign stuff back in those days. And like part of it was probably, I mean, it seems like very true that they're like inspired by this, taking the power back, giving it to the people. And how do we do that? Well, we do that through the money, dude. I mean, because this big giant monstrosity, the bureaucracy, is so huge. Well, we learn civil procedure and rules of evidence, and we learn how the judicial power works through the Constitution. And that's one way. And we learn how to litigate Title 42, 1983 with our stand up around our rights. But that's one way, but it's extremely hard. And then we have these other ways where we begin to have our own way to transact and our own money. That's like the beauty of where this thing is going, man. I hope that's it inspires me every day to like be a part of it, because we have potentially our own, I like to say it's our own sovereign money. I mean, imagine if we all just switched tomorrow and we all started using it, like what would happen? Like we no longer needed fiat. We had our own little community. There's communities out there. There's one in Southern California. I don't even know what it's called now, but there's like this rogue, crazy, off the grid community, and they have their own trading and their own little commerce, it's like a huge amount of acres. I can't remember what it's called, but my buddy told me about it. Anyways, they have their own way to trade. Like they have their own little system, and they on this own giant piece of land out in the desert, kind of like Burning Man. Kind of like that type of community. I mean, where they have their own way. So imagine if we had that, we would be independent. We'd be sovereign, man. So Alex, what do you think, bro?
So I'm a little preoccupied at the moment. Go to someone else and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody else wants to jump up, it looks like Craig is not going to join us today. So we can just open up on the subject and the topics. So maybe, Alex, I don't know, Alex.Sats. I see the Truth Machine's in there. I don't think I've ever heard from him, challenge to him to come up here, or BSV Panama, or anybody else that wants to game tight. If anybody else wants to jump up on stage, feel free to. And then Casey, feel free to add them. I've got an issue on my system. It's not showing me who is requesting right now. So yeah, you can add them. Good. Okay. So yeah, back to you, Brett. What's up? What's going on?
Well, yeah, I just really love what you just outlined, and the money, of course, is the ultimate barometer of that jurisprudence. It's the ultimate test, and in a way, it's kind of the energy of our society. And so the more that it becomes able to freely move, right? Like if you just put water on a table or something like this, right? And then you tilted the table, the water needs to be able to run off, but the more that you can manipulate the way in which that freely moves, then the more that you can. I want to tie this back for a second to this concept of like, the participation trophy, which is, something that is like, really sort of rampant in our way of thinking. And really this concept of the participation trophy, this is the idea that, you know, that we're going to compete to achieve a result, but at the end of the day, we're all going to receive the same reward. So even though we're competing in theory for first or second, we're all going to get this identical reward, because at the end of the day, we don't want to hurt feelings. This is popular for kids that are like 4 and 5 years old, right? Because it's really about orienting them to social norms, not necessarily about encouraging them to outmaneuver each other. But it has these parallels back to this concept of like, it's the world's responsibility to change itself so that my experience of it is more like what I want, or is safer, or is whatever, right? Like, so it's not my responsibility to go out there and to be a vessel or a steward of goodwill in the world. It's the world's responsibility to cater to my needs. And I think that is the paradigm that Bitcoin is really challenging, because Bitcoin is empowering people to go out there and compete and say, hey, there's nothing that's stopping you from interacting. You don't have to integrate with Visa. You don't have to do any of this stuff. All you have to do is just get a basic wallet, and suddenly you can interact globally. You can exchange payments, and it's the exact model that you're describing, Gavin, with your community that's just building their own their own trade network, where they're exchanging goods and services with each other. And really that concept is about the small world network,
Yeah.
And there's never been a technology. So those economies work really well for like communities like you're describing, where they're out in the wilderness or something. They live off the grid. There's 30 or 100 people that are all building, living out of these earthship homes, etc. And they're exchanging with each other. That's completely fine, because they're all in orbit of each other. They walk past each other in the market, right? So they can exchange directly with each other. There's never been a technological aspect to take that model, but bring it to a global scale. And that's what we're seeing with Bitcoin.
Exactly what we're seeing with Bitcoin. Now we're having it potentially be on an online, a virtual world where these will where we have our own independent way to transact. And and we take the power back from the ruling elite, put it back in the people. So, all right, well, we got our friend Craig Mason up today with us. He's had his morning coffee, and looks like he's getting ready to go, man. So, Craig, good morning. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Gavin, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Sorry I'm late. You'd think converting Eastern time would be easy to do, but in my mind, 11 minus 3 is, or 1 minus 3 is actually 11 a.m. Pacific time. So my apologies. But
All
thanks
right,
for
all
having
good,
me.
all good, my friend. Let's yeah, so we were talking about how this space was kind of inspired originally when I started it, about the old 2014 Bitcoin documentary that Craig Wright had done back in Australia, where he talked about how Bitcoin takes away power, and he talked about how that Coca-Cola can, in the future there'll be every Coca-Cola can will have a an IPv6 web address on it, so we'll know exactly who bought it and who the biggest litterer is, and like how Bitcoin can take away power from money. And then you messaged back to me about how you wanted to also talk about the social media side of things, where we've got this creator community where people can begin to own their own data again, own their own content, as opposed to forfeiting it over to a giant institution. So I mean, dude, honestly, I really am more curious to know your story. So how the heck did you get to where you are right now? Craig Mason.
Yeah, thanks, man. Um, there's so much to talk about with Bitcoin. I was just talking to a guy, and I've kind of stopped bringing up BSV to people when I talk about Bitcoin because I know everybody's a BTC maxi out there, but there's still so much to talk about when you first get into Bitcoin. Like I first heard about Bitcoin, and it was about 2012, and I heard it on a podcast with Stefan Molyneux, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And he was talking about, just like the Craig interview you mentioned, he was talking about all of the potential uses for it even back then, and how it takes the power out of money, um, just on the sound money front mainly. I mean, that's what most people know about Bitcoin when they go to the kind of libertarian rabbit hole. But I heard about it then, and I thought this sounds really interesting, and all the points he brought up, it sounds like it has potential, and also the inability to silence Bitcoin to a degree. I mean, he didn't talk about the legality of it, how it's totally legal and was built to be legal, but more so that it's distributed. There's no one point that it can be shut down from. And I didn't buy any Bitcoin back then because I couldn't figure out how to do it, and obviously it would have been nice, but we can talk more about. It'd be interesting to talk about and get your other people's opinions on being a BSV maxi for the last 6 years. But so I eventually bought some Bitcoin in 2016, and it was right when there was all this talk about the split, and or not. It was pre-talk of the split, but there was the arguments going on of should we raise the block size or not. And I was just listening to your podcast with Daniel Krawitz before this, and he said, back then I didn't think anyone would be stupid enough to think that small blocks were a good idea. And I was pretty new to understanding Bitcoin at the time, and I'm not a very technical person. I mean, I've learned a lot about the technology of Bitcoin from studying it, but my background is in accounting. It's not in computer science or anything like that. And when I do try and study that stuff, it's not, it doesn't make inherent sense to me when I look into it. But I could look at this as someone who's not very tech savvy and look at the ideas proposed by both sides and look at the counter arguments, and no one can really make a good case for why scaling on chain and increasing block size didn't work. Besides the fact that Satoshi said it, I just couldn't find a single argument when you listen to people debate as to why we should scale off chain. And I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist. I was back then too. And then you look at the forces behind BTC and who's donating to those causes and the tactics they use. I mean, I don't know. There's probably some axiom that someone could sum up that explains when you see people using disingenuous tactics, all these illogical arguments and manipulative ways of discussing things, that they're usually wrong or they usually have a malign incentive. And you could see so much of that in the way they discuss things. And so I was kind of surprised at the time that everyone went the way of BTC, but it was a good lesson, as I think it was for a lot of people, in how most people can be manipulated. I was just starting to understand at the time how on any major issue where there's malign incentives, you look at the way the world is governed, that people will go against their own interests, the interest of their future children and grandchildren, for the sake of short-term social acceptance or because they don't know any better. And so that's what happened. And, I was obviously on the Bitcoin Cash side. And then the same thing happened again a year later, of course. And I was looking into BSV, and everyone was talking about what a scammer Craig was, and I was involved with, some of you may remember, cryptocurrency called Dash. I was somewhat involved. Yeah, Dash. I thought their concept was pretty interesting. I think that there's some flaws with it, and it didn't work very well. But I remember Craig was talking on Twitter about how it's an unregistered partnership amongst the masternodes, and it's illegal and all these things. And I just replied to one of his tweets and said, "Oh, this is interesting. Can you tell me more?" And so he responded to me. I thought he was, responded very reasonably. And so I just started looking more into what Craig said instead of everything everyone said about Craig. And I thought, when I listened to him and when I listened to the people that were sharing similar ideas, it made me understand a lot more about Bitcoin. It made me understand. It made a lot of sense. And so even though there was this massive, I mean, you could call it a smear campaign against Craig and BSV, and there has been for 5 years straight, I thought the ideas were more compelling. And back then there wasn't too much talk about all the stuff you could do beyond Bitcoin as a currency. I mean, there was some, definitely, but it was before any talk of the MetaNet. And like you said, I guess back then, there, at least it wasn't in the Twitter sphere or the common zeitgeist as much. I don't. I recall Craig talking at some point about, like you said, every Coke can will have have its own address and all these things. And it really, the way that he talks about Bitcoin, the way that regardless of Craig, it doesn't really matter. But the way that people in BSV tend to think about Bitcoin is it has essentially infinite uses. And yeah, the sound money aspect of it's really cool, but it has a lot more power than that, especially when you scale it on chain. And so anyway, I converted all all my BTC to BSV, and I like to tell people that I'm one of the few people who invested in Bitcoin in 2016 and hasn't really sold much of it and hasn't made much money. So and that's fine. We could talk about that too. I think that I was just listening in that Krawitz interview. Jack Lew got on it and he was saying, I don't remember exactly what he was saying, but I think there's a tendency to think, oh, well, we missed out big on not buying BTC. We missed out big on all the pump and dumps of all these things. You could hold any of these, a smattering of the top 100 cryptos from 4 years ago and make a ton of money. I mean, some of them would have gone to basically zero, but look at Ethereum over the last 6 years. And you look at the quality of that, of what is provided by that blockchain, so-called blockchain at this point, and you look at the quality of what's provided by BSV, and it's night and day. But you made way more money if you held BTC or held Ethereum than if you held BSV, even though if you look at the fundamentals, which I think there's, I tend to be a fundamental investor. If you look at the fundamentals, BSV, it's better at everything. The best they can say is, oh, it's not a security. You can't run these full nodes, it's obviously that's pretty much a load of rubbish. But anyway, so this whole experience of not making a bunch of money, kind of, I'm not broke, but a lot of people in BSV, it's like the common meme is everyone in BSV is broke, and there's some truth to that because they watched everyone around them do really well in other things. But this, and I can cope. People accuse me of coping all the time. My Handcash handle is cope, and I can cope, and people might call this cope, but I would say that it's been a good lesson. It's been a good lesson to not make a bunch of money and have to figure out a way to instead work hard and provide value in other ways instead of just getting rich. It's like in the Bible, they say, sooner will a camel go through the eye of a needle than a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven. And you can believe that or not. I'm not saying you can't get rich. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying I think there's things to be learned. I would just say I've learned a lot from kind of being broke from BSV for the last 6 years that I don't think I would have learned otherwise. So I endlessly, it seems like there's endless things to learn about in Bitcoin, and I really enjoy being a part of the so-called BSV community. It's fun because people there, you have to be a different kind of person to, after all of this, after holding BSV for this time or getting into it and watching everyone call you a moron, you have to be someone who thinks for yourself. And so that makes it a really fun group of people to interact with, because very few people, well, increasing every day, but not a lot of people are willing to look at the world in that way outside of what the social norms are. So Yeah,
I,
I guess that's my story, and
I just you 30.
it's been an interesting journey, and I'm enjoying it and don't plan on going anywhere.
Casey.
I just sent you 33 cents on your hand cash handle, Craig. I love doing that when content creators are speaking. That's the whole point of how we can really like reward people. For when you love what they're saying on spaces and stuff like that. Just yeah. So I encourage everybody to go send Craig some love.
What I say I got out of well, one of the things that I got out of what Craig just said was the old concept about like the law of increasing returns. And there was I think it was Emerson that wrote about this, that he talked about how, when you can either take your rewards now. It's like an investment concept. Like you could take your rewards now, take all your profits now and get something out of it, or you could keep adding to it and keep giving to it, keep providing value to it, and then you could take like this massive return in the long term. And so while it may be popular to have invested in Dash or those other cryptocurrencies that Craig had mentioned, that it may have been popular and it may have been the right thing to do if you're a trader. You might have made more money. While at the same time, it sounds like what I really got out of that is like this by putting in all the effort into learning and into knowledge and into growing the community, you're in this you've added so much value in the long term, where in the long term, you're on the right side. It sounds like where the value is going to be huge in the end. So, and everybody, please share this space. Do like a retweet on it if you see it. Retweet it so we can get people in here, and get people to hear Craig. So, but yeah, back to you, Craig. So it sounds like your story goes all the way back to 2012 with when you first heard about this. And were you following like the Ron Paul stuff at that time? Were you like into the freedom? Were you upset about the government? What was your motive, man, to even look at this stuff?
Yeah, I was definitely a big Ron Paul guy. I I went to Kentucky to work on Rand Paul's campaign in 2010, and I think it was 2010 when he was first elected to the Senate. And I went and saw Ron Paul, and I was, I what happened is after the 2008 2009 financial collapse, someone sent me a video of Peter Schiff, and the video was titled something like Peter Schiff was right, and it was him, all these clips of him in 2005 2006 2007 saying the Fed's created a massive bubble, look at the real estate, look at the prices, I can rent my house for way less than you're paying on your mortgage, plus you have to upkeep it and all these things. And that was a huge red pill for me, because I thought, how did this guy see this? And everyone on the media, all these so-called experts, are out there going, oh, it's fine, this guy's Chicken Little. And then he was right, and it causes this massive disturbance. And so that just led me down a rabbit hole of a bunch of things, getting into conspiracies, listening to Alex Jones, just researching all kinds of stuff. And so that led me to find Stefan Molyneux, and somehow he picked up on Bitcoin pretty early. I think he did really well, because and he also, which is funny, he mentioned in I think 2014, he said, if I was the government, I wanted to stop Bitcoin. What I would do is not outlaw it, or go in with the ATF and with the guns and try and shut down all the Bitcoin miners. What I would do is just throw a little bit of sand in the engine, and that's how
That's such a
these people
memorable.
generally tend to work. Not Molyneux, but they're infiltrators, not invaders. There's a great speech by JFK, and you just search JFK conspiracy speech on some non-YouTube platform. Maybe it's even on YouTube still. But he talks about how there's a global, monolithic, ruthless conspiracy around the world that uses infiltration, not invasion. Spies by night instead of armies by day. And so Stefan Molyneux said, and this is true, this is how they operate. And I think that's something that people are massively understanding now, that seemed like a crazy conspiracy theory before. They thought it was just suits in the boardroom trying to maximize profit, but it's something, I think, much more sinister, some evil force that uses subversion. And so anyway, Molyneux said, I just throw a little sand in the engine, just make Bitcoin not work like it's supposed to. And that's exactly what Blockstream did when they came in, and whoever they were funded by, AXA and MasterCard and all these people, and they just got their people in there and said, okay, 1 megabyte blocks, we'll just scale on layer 2. And it takes away all of the value that Bitcoin has, and it's turned it into this number go up cult-like following that doesn't actually do all the things we were talking about earlier. It doesn't allow for micropayments on social media or anything on the internet. It doesn't allow for peer-to-peer payments without any middleman, so you can pay for the things you want a la carte, one by one. And we can talk about that too. I've got I think it goes into a lot of the future of the freedom of speech and aligned incentives there. But that's how I got into it. Just conspiracy theories, going down all these rabbit holes. And that was back when YouTube was, you can just go through and the algorithm would just feed you stuff that you liked and it wouldn't be censored. That it seems like such a long time ago, but it was only 10 or so years ago that all happened. And a lot's changed in that time. And I know I keep saying it, but a lot of people are waking up to this stuff. And I think that what's happening now with BTC is that it is in the spotlight, and more people are going to keep getting into it. And maybe the price will go up to 200,000 or more, who knows? But there comes a point, and I haven't heard anybody disagree with this, but there comes a point with Bitcoin where as people start to use it more, because all these BTC maxis, even most of them say you got to get your Bitcoin off chain. You got to have it in your secure wallet. Maybe that goes by the wayside and this doesn't happen, but then BTC looks more and more like a speculative pet rock asset. But as more and more people start to take it off chain, I'm sure most people here have heard the numbers where it's like, if everyone wants to move their Bitcoin off chain, it takes like 87 years for everyone to do it. I'm just making up numbers, but it becomes absurd at some point. So I don't know where reality meets the fantasy, the BTC fantasy, but I feel like it can't be too far off. I don't think it's weeks, but I don't think it's decades either. So we'll see what happens there.
Dude, one thing I want to add to that, Alex, you want to chime in on that? But can I just add something here first? That is the stuff that Jack Pitts has talked about, because I think this is a good point to remind everybody where when he was on Wall Street, all right, he was on Wall Street working for a hedge fund, and he was out there shorting companies. This is before the .com bust. And so he was out looking at all these companies like just blatant scams. I mean, obvious scams in his research. They had no value. They were doing absolutely no product and no customers, and they were public companies. And so he would short these things, and he would lose. He would lose his ass. He said that he would short them and they would go up. And then he would short them more and they would continue to go up. He said this went on for, I don't know if it was a year or 2 years, where he couldn't believe that these obvious scams were going up in the face of adversity, where he was seeing there was no possible way they could continue. And I think it is a pretty good analogy at how we are in a very similar place right now, where I mean, shoot, you saw it, you said back in 2016. I mean, you thought, well, there's no possible, or Kraywitz even said, right? He said, there's no possible way that anybody would ever go for a small block. They'd have to be idiots. I mean, he thought there was no possible way. And now here we are, all these years later, and it's continued on. It's grown even further. The psychosis is just everywhere, right? Small blocks are the way to go. So, I mean, I think Jack does a really good job. You could watch interviews on my channel about how he's compared this very similar to the .com bubble and time frame where we're at. So, Alex, you wanted to chime in on something, and I was, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Stefan Molyneux Little Bits of Sand is one of the most memorable things I've ever seen on YouTube, because it's so real in terms of what happened and what strategy you would use to destroy an open protocol that is largely defined by the general public. You know, it's got a founder that's not there, that is not there to explain anything or direct anything, and you know, you're largely relying on these authoritarian figures to tell you what is best, simply because, you know, it's an unknown. And I've always kind of wondered what happened to Stefan Molyneux, because I haven't seen him in so long. And I kind of think that, you know, he probably did very well in cryptocurrency because he was there so early on, and kind of did what all the other people did that were early on in Bitcoin, that kind of went, well, I don't have to put up with this troll stuff anymore because, you know, I'm rich enough, and you know, sayonara, I'll see you on the other side, kind of thing. And well, we're going through that at the moment. Craig, you also said, you know, a rich man has less chance of getting into heaven than a camel going through the eye of a needle, which kind of makes me a bit concerned for how long this stuff's going to take. But you know, I guess we'll see. You know, things are starting to move a bit faster now, but you know, it's always moving at a snail's pace in comparison to what you would hope. But yeah, it's ultimately exactly what Stefan Molyneux said: little bits of sand, little bits of sand.
Well,
That's how
can I
you destroy Bitcoin.
ask a question here? When it comes to Peter Schiff, I mean, do you think that's what he's doing by not ever mentioning BSB? Because Kurt clearly educated him on his interview with Peter Schiff. So it just, I don't understand why he has never clarified.
I would just say Peter Schiff is a lot like Max Kaiser,
Yeah.
in that he'll almost say anything to sell his position. And that's not the type of person that is ever going to be honest about what Bitcoin is.
Yeah, he's clearly in bed with crypto crime cartel, in my opinion, but it's just sad to see because he would have such a positive impact on, you know, humanity and like steering massive amounts of people in the right direction if he did. It's just sad to witness him not doing that. So
Well, I was at the after party with Peter Schiff there in London, and you know, he was there at the CoinGeek. This is the 2023 London event. He was there with Calvin and Stephen Matthews, and everybody was there. You know, he was there. He was partying. He knew exactly what was going on. So that was the BSV conference at that time. You know, he
yeah, he's
spoke,
been
and he
on.
was with Calvin, and Calvin, you know, educated him in detail. Yeah, so he definitely knows what's going on.
Yeah, but none of his Twitter posts ever reflect that. So Craig, you know, one of the other questions I had for you was, do you think that this whole Trump pushing Bitcoin thing could be him just shining the spotlight on some of these criminals again, like he's been known to do in the past?
Dude, that's a great point. You know, Craig, I seen you post a lot of, you know, I saw your live space on Saturday where you had stuff about Trump. So it's a great question. What are your thoughts on that? And I'm going to add Ron Paul to this as well.
Yeah. First of all, I don't know why. I've never had this problem on Spaces before, but I only hear when Gavin talks, and I thought there was just a bunch of dead air when Alex was talking, and then I checked on my computer on Twitter, and then I heard him talking. So I missed the first part of what Alex said. I got most of it. And earlier, I don't know if anybody else said anything, but I thought there was a couple other times where I thought no one was speaking. So I'm going to sign in and out of the space in a minute, but I'll respond to. I think was the question. Is Trump bringing this out into the open, you know, exposing criminals? Is that the question?
Are you able to hear Casey? Casey, go ahead.
I can't
I'll
hear Casey. I can only hear you, Gavin.
Okay, Casey,
yeah.
she can't hear you.
Okay, I'll drop down.
I did hear the question though. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I was just
I'll
thinking.
I'll leave the space and I'll come right back in and see if that helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I see Ron Paul trending right now on Twitter. That's crazy. You know, what's going on with that? Bitcoiner end on Ron Paul. I'm going to add Ron Paul to the heading. Owner and former. Well, there's too many words. You can't add anymore. With that, how do I add Ron Paul to this, dude? I think he's trending. There you go, former.
I'm gonna drop down real quick, Gavin. I'll come right back.
Okay. Yeah. So is that Mila all the way from the airport in Germany on stage with us?
Hi, I have arrived at my location. I'm here with Rosita.
You're with Rosita?
Yes,
Say hi.
yes, I will.
So you're there. You guys are ready to get the party started?
I think we might go eat something. It's already 9 p.m. here.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, it's 1 hour, 1 hour more ahead than I usually am. So, yeah.
Nice. I just changed the title of this space. I didn't do a very good job at changing it.
Okay.
Oh no. I just ruined the whole. No, I just deleted the whole thing. How do you, Mila? Maybe you can help me. I don't know. I'm trying to edit the space to add Ron Paul into there, but let's see. Bitcoins. He's trending right now on Twitter. You know, we started talking about Ron Paul. Now he's trending. Be sure everybody to share this space. Like do a retweet or do a retweet on the space itself. That will help the algorithm big time. Bitcoin's power shift. Money, media, featuring Craig Mason. Also on Ron Paul. I don't know. That's what I put. Okay. Mila, okay, Craig's back up on stage. Nice. Craig, how's your audio now? Testing, testing, testing. Craig Mason. I'm going to refresh my page and see if it's on my end.
No, I'm also not hearing anybody but you.
Hold on.
Just you.
Okay, I'm back in. How's that, Craig?
I hear you, Gavin. I don't know if I can hear anybody else. Can anybody else speak and see if I can hear him?
Can you hear me, Craig?
I can hear Alex. I think I'm back.
Nice. You're back. Yeah. I'm going to invite Casey back up and Alex, you're back up. All right, cool. So you were gonna respond about the Trump stuff, about what your thoughts are with Trump. I think the RFK and Trump supporting the Bitcoin. Well, RFK, I don't know if you guys watched that speech. He said he got super rich on BTC. He bought BTC, I don't know, what was it, 2021? And then he invested all of his money that he got from one of the lawsuit settlements that he was an attorney on into BTC. And then he got super rich, he said. I mean, he was already rich, but I guess apparently he got super rich. He talked about that at the conference. That was a cool, little.
I want to encourage everybody to listen to the Centby show, their most recent episode. They went through his entire speech at that conference and dissected every sentence.
Oh.
It was so good and informational. Lauren Gameroff from Centby is definitely somebody we should have on a future space, but it was just very understandable on really explaining all these profound statements that he made about how he was going to do all this with Bitcoin and how it would actually impact the technology and the economy. It was just absolutely, he was just talking such nonsense. It was crazy.
Wow. Dude, so Yeah, I put the Ron Paul. I mentioned Ron Paul in the subject here as well. Here, Craig. So you were on the Ron Paul campaign. You said way back in 2010.
Yeah, that was one of the other things that I first glommed onto when I was going down these rabbit holes. I don't know how I got on Ron Paul, but it was kind of one of the main avenues people got into freedom, liberty, Austrian economics, all these things was via Ron Paul, because he was the voice of reason in the Congress at the time. You know, very similar to Peter Schiff. He was actually, that's probably how I got into him as well. Is he was saying the same thing about the Fed, not to in the same detail perhaps, but he was saying you're just blowing bubbles, blowing the Fed pumps money, and then you have all these crashes. And so he was one of their only other people that was talking sense back then. But I do the Bitcoin conference was really interesting, and I watched a little bit of it before Trump got on. You know, I just put it on the stream and listened to it, and there was the main thing I noticed people cheering for was getting rich, which I'm glad you said the thing about Kennedy, because you know they'd talk about technology and I heard what's his name, Rotamore, the ordinals guy. I heard them asking him about, you know, but so this is cool, this technology, but it's kind of expensive to use. And, you know, how are we going to make it so people can use this? You know, how do we make Bitcoin so that's the chain people want to use? And no one could even conceptualize the idea of raising the block size. So they're just down there talking a lot of nonsense and can't even consider raising the block size.
Did
And
anybody
they
comment
cheer the
on
most for getting
Did anybody comment on using it, like saying,
on what?
"Oh yeah, we could use it. Oh no, don't worry about that. We don't need to use this stuff. Just hold on to it." What was the consensus about that?
It was kind of like, you know, they seemed ill prepared to discuss the question, because there's some hemming and hawing about, you know, this is a use for it, but there wasn't really much talk of any solutions. You know, they kind of brought it up, and it's kind of like an awkward topic, I think, with BTCers, because they don't have a solution. They don't have a good solution. And I think they know by now. It's like the Lightning Network it's similar to woke culture, and that it's just nonsense. You know, it doesn't make sense to be planning your future on these ideas. And so in the conference, there's hardly any talk of scaling, or basically almost none. The idea is just they want adoption. You know, they want people to buy Bitcoin. They don't say it like that, but they kind of dance around the subject of that they need people to get into this. You know, a Ponzi scheme, just like they dance around the subject. And then they always cheer so loud when somebody, you know, we all end up getting really rich too. And it's like cheers, massive cheers from the crowd.
Hmm.
And so anyway, Trump, I didn't see Kennedy's speech, but Trump is a really interesting case, because I'm sure a lot of people have also seen where Trump tweeted, I think it was July of 2019, something about, I don't trust Bitcoin, I like the US dollar. And you know, he was up until pretty recently, I think, pretty critical of Bitcoin or cryptos, although he did eventually launch some Trump trading cards on, I
Oh
don't know if
yeah,
it was
ETH.
Solana or ETH. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And oh yeah, go ahead.
that was my reason of asking you, is like he was critical of it in the past. So do you think the shift is because he's like doing the shining the light on the criminals and the dark behavior thing, trying to get people to go like look into all these people
Well,
that he's put in the spotlight?
that's a good question. I mean, do you think that Trump is legit? You know, Craig, is he really legit, or is he just part of the problem? I mean, what is your opinion on it, on Trump?
Yeah, Trump, interesting case. I mean, my opinion has been for a long time that Trump is legit. You know, there's a lot of things people criticize about Trump that's very similar to how they criticize Craig. You know, they say that Trump doesn't deliver. He didn't build the wall. He didn't lock Hillary up. He did partially build the wall, but in any case, they criticize Trump for, you know, being too close to Israel, not getting enough done in his first term, and, you know, pushing the vaccine. But I think my read on it, which people will say, "Oh, you're a schizo, you're coping," all these things. But my read on it, and I've examined it, in great detail of the logistics of how this could be playing out. And people say, "Oh, it's just 4D chess coping," but you are going up against a really evil, really smart, really long-term thinking, monolithic enemy, like Kennedy said. And to defeat someone like that, I heard someone say recently that Satan is not dumb. The evil force is not dumb. It's not that they're not hardworking. They are constantly working towards trying to break down the world, bring in evil. They're very crafty, very clever. But the one thing that they don't have that you or I might have is some humility. They are always prideful, and they never think that people like us could ever in any way outsmart them. So they're kind of predictable in that regard. They always are. They always try and stop anything they see. Anything they see that could upend their plan. And I think part of their plan is that they have to keep us dumb and uneducated. And to look for the proof of that, you only need to look at the media historically over the 20th century and currently. Look at the efforts of big tech to censor any ideas that are outside of that, and look at how much they try and take over education to brainwash the children, and how much they want to dumb you down with the food they feed you and other, we could say, medical procedures. And so if you wanted to defeat someone like that, I think the 4D chess narrative actually kind of makes sense, because they are always going to, when they see something, they're trying to stomp it out. Their energy goes right towards anything that they see as a threat. And so if you knew that was the case, then why would you not, if you were smart and long-term thinking, design a plan to use, like the Art of War says, use your enemies' energy against them, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but if your enemy is easily provoked, provoke them, and you let them wear themselves out. I think that's what. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go over to Alex Favell. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say on the Trump thing that we're before an election, and anything that a candidate says is trying to get voters on their side so that they can get into power. And I do believe that Trump is a genuine guy, but at the same time, I think he will say as much as he can without being disingenuous to get into power, especially for an election as we have this year. So, I see it as him pandering to the crypto crowd without being, kind of dismissive or taking a side of anything, because everything in his speech you could construe as positive for crypto in general or BTC. But then, is he really clued in on what's going on with BSV and stuff? I would assume that he is, just because, uh, I don't think it's possible that the people around him haven't warned him that, Craig could be Satoshi, and there's a lot of cases going on. So, just don't take a side until it's all cleared up or whatever. And with RFK, I would say that it's something similar. But the RFK play, there's even talk of him, dropping out of the campaign and joining forces with Trump, which would be remarkable, and might actually even suggest that JD Vance loses his VP and RFK takes it. But these are all just speculation of what's going to happen. But it's an election year. You can't trust anything a politician says. Trump these days is a politician, so he's buying votes effectively. So we'll see what happens after November with what Trump actually thinks.
Yeah. So back to you, Craig, on the Trump stuff. So you think that he's legit? You think, in your opinion, you've been obviously following this stuff. I watched your live on Saturday. You're following. I mean, that speech he had in 2017, the one that's that's an unbelievable speech. The one that talks about bringing the power back to the people. I mean, it's it's beautiful. I mean it. So is that what you're going off of, or do you have more information? Because I mean, a lot of other people like Jason from Archaics and others, they say that it's just more talking heads. So what what do you think is going on, man?
Yeah, no, I'm not 100% sure he's convinced, but I haven't heard an argument that convinces me otherwise. And real quick to Alex's point, yeah, that would make sense that Trump could be, pandering before an election. I think he definitely does that. I think every politician does that. I think that it's just how you have to play the game to some degree. But so Trump, yeah. So reasons I think he's legit. I mean, I I kind of hate to bring it up, but I feel like it's important to discuss because of the arguments therein. But I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the Q phenomenon, and I don't think that reading that and thinking it's legit makes it so you think that, oh, there's some plan that you have to trust, and you're just blindly trusting it. Um, and then you're some kind of sheep in that regard, and Trump is actually a scammer. I would say it would look the same if that was the case, or reading the Post if it was legitimate. There's the argument, and I'll get into why I think that, but there's also, one could say, why would they? Is that just to keep us all pacified? Maybe it is, but I think that if they were willing to destabilize society and bring in total chaos, that they could do that without some kind of Operation Trust style thing. But the reason, a lot of these people who say, "Oh, you're just some Q-tard," blah blah blah, they haven't read the posts and understood the nuance of it. Regardless of the point of the Q post, I think, is not to get you to trust Trump. It's to get people to understand what actually is going on and understand not just, oh, there's something you need to trust, just trust us. It's so much more than that. It's understanding how these people operate and understanding the knowledge we need to stop that, because it is inherently, I think, on its face, true that they need us to believe certain things in order for them to keep their power. They need us to believe that the government has our best interest in mind, and we should trust all these plans. Global warming is going to destroy society, and all these things. And so the point is, the underlying point of those posts, or the reason I trust Trump, is because I'm pretty sure I trust Trump is that there is the important part of this whole operation is that people wake up to what's going on, and I think that's happening more and more every day. And an example of that is the vaccines. People love to talk about how Trump is bad because of Operation Warp Speed, where he pushed the vaccines out. There's a great movie, or great for educational purposes, movie called Contagion, and I don't know if anybody's seen this, but seems like it's predictive programming for the pandemic, where they have this virus and it shuts down society, and they're waiting years and years and years for the vaccine, and society totally destabilizes, and people aren't safe in their homes, and it's just total anarchy, and it crumbles, and then the vaccine comes in and saves the day, of course. But they're waiting years for the vaccine. Instead, which they never thought Trump would do, I think, Trump says, let's get it out right away. It would have been years if I brought it out. And they bring it out right away. And, if you look at the data, and believe me, I didn't take it. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm not a doctor, talk to your doctor, of course. But it actually, they're just like anything else, there's costs and benefits. If you took the vaccine, there was some short-term benefit to a lot of people. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but the side effects for some other people were horrible, and I'm perfectly happy and I'd say glad I didn't take it. But the bottom line is, And what's happening as a result is that regardless of Trump, because Trump never said you have to take it, it was all the regular establishment said you have to take it, you should lose your job if not. Trump always said, yeah, you should have a choice. You should take it, but you should have a choice. But what's happened since then is that there is a massive awakening to the medical establishment since then, because these companies like Pfizer, people used to trust so much more than they do now. And now people totally get it. People, you know, I won't get into any personal medical histories of me or my family, but I will just say that any alternative views seem a lot more acceptable than they used to. So the bottom line with Trump and all this stuff is that I think he's playing a massive long game. Maybe I'm coping. I think this is all 4D chess. But I don't think that I don't think that there would be such an awakening to these ideas like there is now if there wasn't something that is that seems to line up with everything Trump is doing. It seems to be happening in terms of a great awakening. And I think that Bitcoin, just like with the vaccines, I think Trump is putting that in the spotlight and taking this to the inevitable conclusion of, okay, if we're going to use Bitcoin, let's get everybody on board and use it and see what happens. Because I think we all know what happens if everyone starts using so-called Bitcoin, you know, BTC. It doesn't work. Lightning Network is a disaster. You can't scale on chain. The fees are high. And I think he's accelerating. I think he's Operation Warp Speeding BTC. And to me, that seems like a good thing, you know?
Wow.
So that's my thoughts.
That's a whole nother angle that I never even considered. So you're saying that like his speech at that event was like, all right, everybody, let's use Bitcoin. Let's do it, everybody. Peer-to-peer cash. Let's get it going. You know, this ought to be fun. Everybody get it going and warp speed it and see what happens.
Yeah, that's my cope anyway. That's what I think is happening. And at the end of that speech, he says, we're going to make Bitcoin bigger, you know, better. But he says bigger. You know, I feel like that might have been a nod to bigger blocks. So we'll see what happens.
We'll make it bigger, faster, and everybody could use it faster now.
Exactly.
Dude, it's like that's an interesting angle, man. I never even thought about that. How there could be more to it with his Bitcoin. And there's no doubt about it that he knows what's going on with the Satoshi cases. I mean, come on, these are international. I mean, anybody inside of the legal sphere, they know about the case. They may not be talking about it, but they know it's not settled yet. And you know, a case is not settled yet till it's done on appeal, and it's not. It's just as live as it was the day it started. You know, so we don't.
Yeah, and in that time, you know, after all this time since the fork, BSV has just gotten bigger and bigger and more powerful, and all the stuff that everyone said was mumbo jumbo and you can't scale on chain. It's all there and ready to go now, pretty much. You know, it has its hiccups from time to time, but we are sitting here with this massive network, still with only 21 million coins, and the price is so low and it's so incredibly capable. And we're just sitting here waiting for people to take notice, and it's not going anywhere. You know, all this stuff with Craig and the cases, this could be another example of 4D chess, is that Craig loses this big case. You know, he said many years ago, I think before or around the time of BSV, he said, I'm sacrificing my reputation for the good of humanity. He said that's where his Professor Faustes old Twitter handle came from. And
Whoa, what is that? I never.
Oh yeah.
That.
Yeah, so someone asked, or I don't know what the context was exactly, and I don't have the screenshot handy, but he said that it comes from some literary criticism of Faust, and that the character, I don't know if it was Faust as the character or what, is sacrificing his reputation for the good of all humanity. And he said this so many years ago, and now here he is, you know, to most people, totally discredited. Which he was hated and discredited in most people's eyes before that, but now he loses this big case and he's out of the spotlight to some degree. And yet here's BSV, bigger and more capable than ever. And it's this massive opportunity for someone who wants to use it. But Craig, who is this figurehead, is now, you know, he's kind of out of the picture to some degree. So it's interesting to see what will happen with that, I think.
Dude, yeah, definitely interesting. And I mean, the case is not anywhere near over. So, I mean, I know that people will say, oh, Craig's on Satoshi, but that's just the trial court level. This case has always been going to appeal since day one. And so now we just have to wait and see, did Craig file the proper paperwork? Is it going forward with his law? There's so many unknowns right now. We know that he's at least applied, but there's going to be something will happen next on, oh, they're accepting the application. His counsel is going to file a brief. Opposing counsel with COPA is going to file a reply brief, opposing brief. That's got to be announced soon. And we're not going to hear it from the other side. We're not going to hear any good news from COPA. Okay, they're quiet. We only hear the bad news, like, oh, Craig didn't file his paperwork. He didn't do anything. So we're only, relying on very limited information. We can't see the docket. So, okay, who do we have up on stage, Casey? Anybody? Oh, Brett's back. Looks like so. We got. I know, Brett. Have you been listening in to our conversation here?
Yeah, just towards the end there, I had to jump off for my cousin called. I hadn't spoken to in a long time. Sorry about that.
No problem. Yeah. I mean, Craig's been, we kind of went off onto the political angle as well. And he's been following Trump a lot. He worked on the Ron Paul campaign way back in the day. And, he's been sharing kind of his insight on what he believes really is going on with the Trump side of things and how it's actually, Trump is doing a Operation Warp Speed with Bitcoin. And he's saying, all right, great, everybody, let's use Bitcoin. Let's get it going. Peer-to-peer cash, small casual payments. Let's scale it to the moon. Let's do this, let's get it everybody out there. And it's like he's putting a test out there to everybody to start using it. And
if he doesn't really know what the technology is and he's just like following other leaders, it could be really, really bad though if they're setting him up to make him look terrible when everything crashes or something and they blame it on Trump.
Well,
that was I was thinking could possibly happen.
Crypto Voyager, you got your hand up, buddy. Welcome to the stage, my man. How you doing?
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry, I had to come up because I was having a big dose of hopium from Craig over here with the thing with Trump. Okay, so as I understand it, like 10% of the population has ever heard of Bitcoin. Out of those 10, maybe 10% know what it's about. And out of those 10, maybe they have an inclination that big blocks are something. And out of those 10, there are a few that actually understand that this whole thing is a charade and just a big game. And you're telling me that the statistics say that Trump, because because he has such good connections and such amazing talent underneath him, he actually understands all the intricacies of what's going on in Bitcoin. Is that what I'm getting at? No, and not only that, he has also reiterated everything on a supercomputer and has found out what the only way how this thing goes forward. So he's backing now BSV, but not mentioning it anyway. I'm not a Gen Z. I don't really use that vocabulary, but that's a little bit delulu, my friend. Just saying.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I see that it's a stretch, but if you look at things, Casey mentioned, what if they're doing this to set up Donald Trump and make him look bad? He kind of has a way, just like with the Operation Warp Speed thing, that looked bad. That was a bad look for him, I think. And then it turns out 3 years later, that people don't really care about it. And he pushed forward what I think, I don't think most people would understand what they understand now about the potential costs of getting those medical procedures if that had not happened. If Operation Warp Speed hadn't happened. So I think Trump does play the long game. Maybe my opinion is sus, to use the Gen Z vernacular, but I see that the people keep waking up to things, and it seems like Trump does use this tactic of putting people in the spotlight and then letting the fallout happen.
Well, and
to spur this forward.
What if this whole time for years, I'm talking like, since the beginning of Bitcoin, the way it was deployed was to do like a bait and switch where they made all these people that do nefarious things think they were transacting anonymously when actually they just did a big ass sting operation. And then that's part of the whole takedown of all these people, because I guarantee a lot of the human trafficking transactions and all that stuff that have been done in Bitcoin have been tracked and are being immutably will be able to be prosecuted. So there's a lot more going on than we realize. And I guarantee there are, people that are in direct connection with Trump to, it's, I don't know. I really do think that they are using
Casey,
things.
at that point, I'd like to add also that, and I wish I could back this up with some facts, but this is total hearsay and total speculation. But I've heard, and I don't remember who, so you can't blame me for this, but I've heard, and I wish man, I'm sorry, I can't add credibility to this, but from people who I respect at high levels have talked about Monero and these other supposed privacy things are nothing more than a completely more trackable system than ever. Then that they're designed for that. So, and I can't back that up with anything, so you could totally object to that. But that's it. Sure makes a lot of sense to me to set a honeypot on a lot of these privacy things. For all ways to catch people.
Yeah, and it also goes back to the idea that I was talking about earlier, in that one of the only things that these people lack is any kind of humility. And so they always think that they know better, and they never think that anybody like us or, good guys, patriots, whatever you want to call them, that they would ever set any of these traps like this. They would just think, oh, this stupid idiot, he's going forward with our vaccine plan, or he's going forward with BTC. Yeah, I guess I don't know where exactly I was going with that,
Dude,
but
it'd be cool if Alex.Sats wants to jump up here as well. I know he was really following the Ron Paul stuff back in the day as well. It sounds like so if you do jump up, feel free to, bro. We'd love to hear from you. And but on that note, you were mentioning let's see the yeah, just this whole Trump warp speed thing. It could be really a fascinating angle. So, Crypto Voyager, are you satisfied with that response, or are you unsatisfied?
I'm more black pilled than everybody else apparently over here. I'm saying that this whole vaccine thingy majingy is way older and way bigger. I don't think that Trump was there to promote it or to stop it or whatever you want. It was supposed to happen. The question would have been more, could we have allowed years and years of lockdown? That's the question. Because yes, I understand that contagion is kind of like predictive programming, and hey, do you want years of lockdown or do you want the vaccine? And I think that the years and years of lockdown was kind of like the stick for the vaccine as a carrot.
yeah, I think they may not have, with how long the vaccine was going to take, I think they may not have offered it as early as this, and they would have had years and years of lockdown, crash the economy, get everybody used to all this chaos, looting, and all that. I think it wasn't supposed to be an option to happen this soon, and that's what Trump did. They didn't expect, perhaps.
And I'm of the view that it was supposed to happen that soon, and there are evidence for that. I mean, there is logistically no way to create that many vaccines that fast. We have the patents from before COVID. We have even, okay, fine. This one goes a little bit more in the conspiracy side, but we even have the guy from McAfee. We have McAfee saying to not take the vaccines under any circumstance, and that was before warp speed. So again, I'm more black pilled on this whole thing than everybody else here. Maybe Bitcoin deserves to be at $40. Just
let me ask this,
saying.
Craig. What are your thoughts about the theory of the of before he left office, actually, where he actually declared what was called not martial law, but it was that that act. I think it was promoted by oh man, there's a theory out there that the government that he invoked that, what is that act called, that he stayed in office and he stayed in power. You know what I'm talking
The
about?
Emergency Defense Act?
Yeah, the Emergency Defense Act. That may have been it.
Something like that. I don't think that's the exact name.
It wasn't that exactly that, but there used to be a Rumble channel that would go around there that talked about it. It was called the military, anyways, I forget the name of it now, but he went through all the laws and the statutes and the time frame and all these things that were said, and it looked like it all lined up that there was actually he invoked this martial law, procedure. I mean, I don't know. Is that possible, Craig?
Yeah, that's in fact, I maybe I can find this thread that I was reading the other day that was talking about the same thing. But yeah, it's there's been some talk of that you know, if you that this idea that Trump stayed in power and Joe Biden is essentially a puppet in order to display how bad things are under the deep state rule. You know, I think so many more people are open to the idea that Trump actually wasn't a bad guy when they were told he was such a bad guy by the media. When they compare the last 4 years of Joe Biden to the 4 years before that of Trump, I think most people in America and probably worldwide are better off in a lot of cases. And um,
Well, didn't they in mainstream news now is a Wall Street no, it's New York Post. They have an article where they were showing Joe Biden was doing his White House press briefing in Georgia at a Hollywood studio. You know, that's mainstream news, you know, at a suite in Georgia, not in Washington D.C. So how can you explain that?
yeah, that's a great point. There's so many of these. You know, you might look at them in glitches as glitches in the matrix, or you know, I look at them as signals to people who know what's going on, to what's really going on. You know, there's, like you said, there was that. There was early on in Joe's tenure as president, there was a situation where he kind of looked like he reached his hand through a microphone and it looked like it was a green screen. And if you know, I analyzed it, and I'm not a video expert, but you know, my friend who's a professional looked at it, and if you look at it, it's obviously there's something going on, something edited. It wasn't normal live footage of what it looked like. There was videos of when he was in the Oval Office, and the trees didn't look anything like the trees outside. There is
They
there's
have an
more.
entire stage next to the White House that is publicly known. That is where they are doing a lot of Joe Biden's public announcements and stuff. You know, it's not even windows. They're TV screens in some of the things. There's photos of it. Like I'll try and find them and post them in the comments.
Yeah, there was also one where Joe Biden they were having something at the outside the White House, and then someone was at a hotel, you know, not far away, and looked over, and there was all this cheering on the live video feed, but then you looked over and nothing was happening there, no cars, nothing. It was just totally desolate. It was supposed to be live at the White House, and then there's also videos of Trump talking about where he says he's talking about Joe Biden's term. And he says, you know, maybe this kind of is my second term. You just make several nods to that going on, and so I think there is some credence to the idea that, you know, the Patriots are in control. This is meant to show us the truth about what's going on. You know, we're watching a movie, things like that. I know it sounds crazy, but there is some truth to the idea that people will only find the will to change when you show them the truth, when you take them to a difficult place, you take them to the precipice of the downfall of America. And it's just there's just too many weird things going on that something is not right with Joe Biden as a normal president. I don't mean his dementia. I mean that is something strange in that he's not actually the president that we see because of all these weird glitches in the matrix. So
Something definitely weird.
Yeah.
And I would say, honestly, I'm going to give this bold opinion, but I will say in my humble opinion, there's no doubt about it that he invoked the Insurrection Act right before he left office, because there's certain things that he said, and those line up with the things that you're required to say and give notice of. The exact words he said publicly, you know, were a required disclosure that need to be made inside the Insurrection Act, and he did those things. He didn't write it as a brief. Hey, we're in the Insurrection Act. He just did it publicly in video press releases. You know, so that alone totally sets a you know, wrench in this thing, man. So I mean, I don't know how does that affect Bitcoin in going forward, right? You know, if that's the case, we're under like a military operation, right? I mean, so now we're dealing with it at a much higher level. It's not just one guy. So
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the whole idea behind the plan, so to speak, is that it's a military intelligence operation. You know, when Trump was inaugurated, you saw these military guys come down and stand behind him for a brief moment and then walk back. And if you look at their insignia or the braids on their hat, they're from military intelligence.
It's also
And
never happened before during a president's speech ever.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you. I
Oh,
hadn't
that
heard
never
what.
happened. So that's not normal, Alex.
No, not normal at all. They're there for 30 seconds while Trump is talking about transferring the power from DC back to the people of the United States.
Oh, that speech, the one that you played on your live, Craig.
The inauguration speech.
Yeah, similar phrasing in there, but not the same speech. And yeah, I hadn't heard the specific words you have to say about the Insurrection Act. That's interesting. I'd like to see that.
I saw a breakdown of that on Nino's Corner, and it was he had like five or eight people breaking it down, and they broke down the legal, all the legal requirements in a panel. That was a long time ago. I saw that, and I looked it up and cross-referenced it, and it totally matched up to the disclaimers that were required to be given at the time of the insurrection, because you got to say certain things. And it doesn't say that you got to say them on a letter. You just have to tell the public. You have to give notice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was like a DEF CON or something. There was like this other one. There was like this one guy. He used to be out there in the open, and he talked about much more in detail. Around 2021, there was he had a Rumble channel, and he went through that all in detail. It was like another level of it, DEF CON or something. I don't remember, but yeah, it's definitely interesting, man. So, I mean, it seems like definitely on the conspiracy side, but at the same time, it's mainstream.
Can I just add
Alex.
on the awakening that Craig was mentioning? For me personally,
Come closer to your mic.
sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. For me personally, it wasn't Trump getting into office or any of his speeches. It was that they shut down the entire world during a US election year. And when you look at Trump, he was basically going, I'm going to give you the freedom of choice to deal with this how you want. And it's up to the authorities throughout the US and the rest of the world to deal with it however they see fit. But we are going to accelerate the vaccine as fast as possible so that you have the choice as fast as possible. Maybe you don't trust the vaccine because it was accelerated or whatever, but the whole freedom of choice point is so important to the movement of liberty or sovereignty, right? You should be able to choose your own path. And I feel like with Bitcoin it's the same thing, in that Craig has removed the authority of Bitcoin to say that you have a choice. Either you can follow other people that claim to be representative of what Bitcoin is, or you can think for yourself and really put the work in and get to the result naturally and organically and fairly, because effectively the first mover of advantage of Bitcoin has been completely removed. BSV is basically the last mover. And if you listen to Peter Thiel, he always kind of says, you never want to be the first mover. You always want to be the last mover. And the reason you want to be the last mover is because you learn from everyone else's mistakes. But what Craig has kind of proved is that he already figured out everything beforehand. He already knew that all the other systems failed before they even got off the ground because it concentrates power, or it has an authority, or it just doesn't meet the technical requirements, or whatever it might be. He'd already thought about most of this stuff, so that gave him the ability to kind of do whatever he wanted, which is stay in the shadows and not be known as one of the world's most important inventors, which then comes with it a lot of light which disinfects, but it also destroys your entire family because not many people actually want to be famous. So I think that is the key tenet of a lot of what is going on, in that you are given the choice to proceed with your life as you want, but you have to do the work to figure out what is the right choice. And we're seeing a lot of damage from that. But I think in the long term, it's generally the right thing, because no one should be forced to do anything, right? We should always have the choice to do what we think is right. And unfortunately, most of the population get that wrong.
So on that note, Alex, I really want to ask you, do you know anything about Sabrina Wallace?
First time I'm hearing that name. Can you explain more?
Yeah, definitely. You should go down that rabbit hole, because that is a very important
Just try to
aspect.
use words careful so I can put this on YouTube if you're going to go in any sort
Of
of.
course. Yeah, it's just basically look up Sabrina Wallace, Internet of Bodies. WBAN is the hashtag look up. It's very important stuff, and it all has to do with the blockchain. Like, Craig, that video you posted the other day about how God has us all on the blockchain. Can you elaborate on that theory? That was really hilarious and on point and funny, and there's just so much more going on to this matrix, and it all has to do with artificial intelligence and hooking humanity up to the blockchain. So what are your thoughts on all that, Craig?
Yeah, Craig, before you answer that, I wanted you to also actually comment again on this Professor Faustes thing. So it sounds like you're saying that Professor Faustes was a person that was going to sacrifice himself like a lamb, of like some sort of a.
Yeah, can you go over the story of
Yeah.
Professor Faustes for those that don't know?
That's my first time hearing anything about that. So I'm just, go back. If you could be so kind to comment on that, Craig, or explain more.
Yeah. It's definitely an obscure piece of Craig lore, and this is the first time I've told that story that people seem really interested in it. So I'm definitely happy to go through it again.
I would say it was the most important piece of Craig lore, because it explains a lot of what he's doing and how he views the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So Professor Faustes
I'll see if I can find it, but
yeah. So basically, for my remembers, I remember finding about Craig on Twitter back in the day. When I mean, I was following the Kleiman case, back in the day. I think it was 2018. I started reading the Kleiman case, so I'm like, okay, well, this guy's on X too, or this guy's on Twitter. And at that point, I really, didn't know much other than the Kleiman case was kind of like my first exposure to him. That was it. And I thought, wow, this guy's really involved in this thing. And I remember he posted a lot on Twitter, and he had that handle, Professor Faustes. That's all I know. I never looked into what that even meant. So
okay, I found the original tweet. I don't have a date on it, but it's from his Professor Faustes handle, and it's approximately 2018, around there. And
he posted in the reply here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can. I just lost it. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. So he says, Hazlitt, William, Lectures on the Age of Elizabeth, 1820. If you want to understand Faust. And then it's a screenshot of William Hazlitt. And it says, Hazlitt is of the opinion that Marlowe's writing burns with passion and imagination non-stop and maintains a critical energy that's naturally transferred into the stage. So I don't know. I'm stopping there. I'm seeing does anybody know what this is from? Marlowe, what book this is or play?
Marlowe is a writer who was a critique of the Faustus novel, I believe.
Okay, great. So it goes on to say,
and Craig actually went under a pseudonym of Marlowe on Medium as well.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's really interesting too. And so I'm looking here, and it says, I was on Wikipedia, Dr. Faustus play, the tragical history of the life and death of Dr. Faustus, commonly referred to simply as Dr. Faustus. It's an Elizabethan tragedy by Christopher Marlowe, based on German stories. What the title character is called Faust. Okay, wow. I had no idea what this was from. I'm glad we looked this up.
So he wasn't a critique, he was the author. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the critique is by Hazlitt. He's talking about Hazlitt's interpretation. He says, Hazlitt argues, this is the screenshot from Craig Wright's tweet I'm back to. Hazlitt argues that the character of Faustus can be considered as a, quote, personification of the pride of will and eagerness of curiosity, sublimed beyond the reach of fear and remorse. That's from Hazlitt. which has straightforward explanation concerning why this character would act upon his emotion and not reason, considering the unusual and supernatural circumstances. Then this part Craig has highlighted in his screenshot. It says, Hazlitt stresses the importance of Faust's extraordinary intellect in acting as the decider to ultimately sacrifice himself to gain knowledge and experience that will benefit mankind. Hazlitt consequently believes that Faust was not in fact acting to fulfill his own selfish desires, but as a martyr to collect knowledge for all of us. Which sounds a lot like Craig to me. Or at least an interesting interpretation of how of what Craig might be up to with the way he's acting.
Can you go over the story of Faustus? Because as far as I understand, Faustus was a doctor who was on a ruthless pursuit of knowledge and then made a deal with the devil to kind of extend time before midnight. But after midnight, something happened. I can't remember what it was. He eventually got all the knowledge of the world, and then like his family thought he was dead or something.
Okay, yeah, here I've got a summary of The Tragical History of the Life and Death of Dr. Faustus by Marlowe. It's a play that tells the story of Dr. Faustus, a scholar who becomes dissatisfied with the limits of human knowledge and turns to necromancy to gain supernatural powers. Faustus makes a pact with the devil, selling his soul to Lucifer in exchange for 24 years of unlimited knowledge and worldly pleasures. Over time, Faustus experiences both the thrill of his newfound powers and the torment of his impending damnation. Despite several opportunities to repent, Faustus remains trapped in his deal, ultimately facing eternal damnation as the play ends with his tragic demise. The play explores themes of ambition, power, and the consequences of overreaching. Wow. So did Craig make a deal with the devil? That's a little dark.
Craig has said he made a deal with the devil, but I
Really?
think it's more of a Faustus interpretation in that he's sacrificed his life to consume as much knowledge on the internet as possible to, gift that to humanity.
Oh yeah, that would go with his interpretation, or the interpretation from Hazlitt that he posted. The importance of Faust's extraordinary intellect in acting the decider to ultimately sacrifice himself to gain knowledge and experience that will benefit mankind. So yeah, that's a very interesting interpretation that Craig he has sacrificed a lot in his reputation, certainly, for the benefit of humankind. So interesting.
Brett, did you want to comment on any of this?
Hey, thank you. Yeah, well, I don't have a comment on this except just that it's very fascinating. I really love, but I did have a question. Maybe that's, I don't know, it could be related. My question, and I ask this question a lot, so partially because I don't understand it. But just in Craig's trial, he talked about that there was certain information that he couldn't divulge due to national security of the United States. And I wondered, did you have any thoughts on that, Craig?
Yes, that's interesting, because people say, a lot of people have brought up, oh, Craig seems like he might be a Fed, in here to make the real version of Bitcoin look bad, or some people think that Bitcoin is an evil system, but he's definitely has worked with the government. He said, I've worked with the government, and he said he's worked to some degree to help stop human trafficking, child trafficking. In one of the trials, I think it was one of the trials, maybe it was a deposition, he seems to get kind of emotional, if I'm remembering this right, talking about these things and the evil stuff that people have used these things to do, and it seems like he legitimately wants to stop them. So that also ties into a lot of the themes that people think Trump and people like him might be trying to stop, the human trafficking, the child trafficking. And it seems like Craig has acknowledged, you look at one of his old business cards and it has some government logos on. So he's definitely worked with the government to some degree, hopefully for good.
Yeah, and I guess specifically he mentioned Gareth Williams with like the story of him having ended up, he was part of MI6.
Gareth Williams was?
Yeah, he was the like British secret agent that ended up in a duffel bag. And he, I think Craig even mentioned him probably for the first time that I've heard as being like a key third member in terms of the, implementation or the development of Bitcoin originally. He said, yeah, it was him, Gareth Williams, and Dave Kleiman.
So he was an MI6 operative and apparently a high ranking official and former agent. Or maybe is he, I don't know. That's the first time I've heard about Gareth Williams. Craig, are you familiar with any of that?
No, not at all. It's first I've heard of it.
Yeah, so Gareth Williams and maybe Casey might know a little bit about this too, but Gareth Williams ended up being killed in a hotel room in a bathroom, and he was in a duffel bag. The duffel bag was locked, and then underneath his body, which was dismembered and put into the duffel bag, and there it was supposedly Russian agents that were fingered as being involved with this murder, but apparently it wasn't a murder because it was a suicide. That was the official ruling of the death. The cause of the death was the suicide, despite the fact that it was a dismembered body with a key to a lock underneath the body, and then the lock was obviously it had to have been locked from the outside of the duffel bag. So if you Google that, it made like massive headlines.
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, Brett, he wasn't dismembered. He was in the duffel bag alive when he was put in there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all
But
good.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought that could potentially have some, there could, again, there's lots of pieces of the information, that we're seeing not necessarily the entire picture, and people get frustrated sometimes, like, why isn't the entire picture available for us to just, with a little bit of sleuthing on the internet? And it's like, well, maybe part of the reason why, there's also Kurt talks about this, like Ian Grigg mentioned, people have died for Bitcoin. And that's not like just like a phrase or something like this, but it's it's literally true. And so yeah, I just wanted to ask about that, but check into it if you haven't checked that out yet, Craig.
Right on, dude.
Will do.
I wish the spaces after the trial had been recorded. I don't know if they were, but Kurt and Robin DeLisser and a couple other people, Rafael Laverde, went super deep into all this stuff. I feel like I learned so much more about Bitcoin in one day from one of those after spaces from the trial than I had in years. So that would be an amazing topic to go down that is very intriguing for people one of these days.
Yeah. Speaking of that, next Friday, we're going to have a space with Kurt Walker Jr. on Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific time. So be sure to tune in for that. See it on my profile there and set a reminder. Be sure to retweet this space and get the word out there right now. If you see it, please share it and leave a comment on it as well. So, okay. Yeah. Back to you, Craig. I mean, what have you been talking about on your on your lives lately? I mean, what's really on your radar? I watched your Saturday live that you had. It was really, really interesting. And it seems like you've been doing that for a long time, so as a media figure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I started making videos in 2017, and I really like the live format because it allows for a lot of interaction. Spaces are same thing. I really like spaces as well as a format. And so, I used to be pretty heavy into the day-to-day politics of stuff, but now I more so keep an eye on it. I've been talking, or Bitcoin, I think, has been more interesting to me in the last 2 years, but I still keep an eye on news, especially lately because it's going into an election season. And this will be, I think this will be a good test to see if any of the stuff that the people who think that they're are patriots in control to some degree, if that's shaking out as expected, because it's maybe maybe there'll be 4 years of Kamala. Maybe that's what we need. I don't know. So you could cope about that too, but it finally seems like that people are waking up more and more, And I think there will be a lot more information coming out in the next few months. Every election season seems to get crazier than the last one. And the last one, there was so much unfair counting of the ballots that I think that there's going to be a lot more vigilance this year. I think that people won't. I mean, I think it's the first time in American history we saw a legitimate fraud of the presidential election. And I think that although a lot of people say, oh, they haven't done enough to prevent it, I think that people are going to be 100 times more vigilant than they were last time, because Trump won in 2016. And even though they probably tried to defraud that too, I think. And in 2020, they successfully defrauded the election. And now, because that's actually happened, people see what these people are capable of, and I think that they're going to be. I think we're seeing some rulings by state courts that are going to make this election more fair in certain key swing states, and you're going to have 100 times more eyes on this year, and that's going to be interesting to see. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm keeping my eyes on. You know, I'm not too concerned with the day-to-day of politics, really, but it is interesting to see. And you know, I do think that there's a good case that patriots are in control. And I think that, you know, I think the best evidence of that is if you consider, unless you don't think it's important for people to wake up to what's going on with Bitcoin or otherwise, which Bitcoin, the Great Awakening is, I think it's like 6 years behind, or, you know, I'm just making up a number, but it seems way more behind given how many people know about BSV. But on every facet, if you look at the comment sections and compare them to 8 years ago, people are not buying the argument of, oh, you're a racist. You know, people used to argue and say, no, I'm not a racist because whatever reason, I have black friends, or look at the data, it doesn't matter, who cares, or here's why I think this. People now, when you say something woke like, oh, you just like Trump because you're a racist, they do what they should have done 8 years ago, which is just disregard their opinion because it's such nonsense. 99.9% of people are not in this because of some nonsense prejudice. They're in it because most people, you know, I don't know what percentage it is, if it's 97 or 98 or 99, but most people either want to get along and have a productive life and take care of their family and want everyone to have equal rights. And that is, and the reason they go along with the total nonsense of these policies that destabilize society essentially comes down to communism is because they've been tricked. You know, their minds and their desire to be fair and get along with people has been turned against them. You know, they tell these people, you know, whatever it is, you are not successful because white people are racist, or you are not successful because you're a woman, or you were not successful for whatever reason. They are taking away people's dignity and power to make their own choices. And Alex, I'm glad you brought up the idea of choice, Trump giving people a choice, because I think that's what a lot of this comes down to, is you can't legislate or mandate a society where people choose to use logic and understand what's going on and make good choices. You can't mandate that. It doesn't work. You know, you look at that at anything you try and mandate good, it just doesn't work. You can't mandate prosperity. It just doesn't work.